Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Off Script with Emma. This episode is all about what it takes to become a remote closer. What steps did I take to learn the skills? What was that journey like? And then where exactly am I now? If you're someone who's in the midst of a career change or learning a new skill or doing something different, this is for you. We talk about the messy middle of making a change and some of the things that might be helpful for you in your transition. I want to start this episode by telling you and talking about something that I came across on social media when I was in the midst of a doom scroll. And it's called the transition curve. And when I had come across it, I think it's by Alex Hormozi, or he has created his own version. But basically it is a transition curve. Basically a line that goes up and it comes down and then it goes up again. And on each part of the curve is a different phase or stage that you'll go through when you're going through a transition. So whether that is learning a new skill, building a business, growing a business, doing something different than you would typically do when you transition from one thing to another. And when I came across this curve, it made me so acutely aware of the different phases that you'll go through if you decide to do a career change, make a bold move, do anything different. And it's been so helpful for me because when I get to points of, is this for me? Do I actually want to do this? Should I just go back to teaching? I remind myself where I am on the curve and I continue to keep going. It gives me the motivation to just push through because I'm just in that part of the curve. So there's 5 main parts of the curve. When you go through something new and exciting, you typically start at the top. And this is what's called the uninformed optimism part of the curve. So it's like the high point. You're excited, you're starting something new, you've got all this motivation and energy, and you jump right in. Then what happens, so that's part 1. Part 2 is when we start to have a curve dip. So we actually start to come down. And this is when we go from uninformed optimism, so we're excited, to informed pessimism. So we have more information, but we're on a down because we're actually starting to realize the ins and outs of what it takes to do the thing. And what happens is we keep going down the curve. The more informed we are about what it takes, the further down we get. Our bodies naturally are pushing against us, resistance. It doesn't like change. Things feel hard. There's lots going on. And we get right down to the bottom of the curve. And this is called the crisis of meaning point. The crisis of meaning point is basically where you go, fuck this, I'm out, this sucks, it's too hard. And when you get to that point, you can either make the decision to continue to go down that path and basically quit, or you can come back up the curve to another optimistic part of the curve, but this time it is informed optimism. So you have the information, but now you're feeling a bit more positive about it. When you look at the curve, it makes a lot more sense, but this is basically the context of how I want to describe my journey because it is so fitting. It is so fitting. It makes so much sense because I have been at every part of the curve. And what I'm really grateful for is that when I got to the part of the curve where I could have just gone, you know what, I'm out, I want to quit, I had someone really close to me actually challenge me on that and push me to where I am today. So that's what I really want to share. So let's start at the beginning. When you are at the peak of the excitement level, this is the uninformed optimism. You don't know too much about it, but you're excited. So for me, that was when I had come across She Sells with Brooke. Brooke is who has taught me everything that I know, as well as Tash, one of the head coaches there, and Scott, another coach in the business. But for the most part, it's She Sells with Brooke. When I came across Brooke, we had actually a mutual friend. And like I said in an earlier episode, I jumped on a call with one of the coaches. I gave them a think about it objection because I was terrified. But inevitably I jumped into the course. And this was where I had the uninformed optimism. It was the exciting parts of a career change. It was working in remote sales, earning good money, working from home. I was on a high. Even though I was learning the skills alongside teaching, so it was definitely a grind, I was in the excitement period because I was building a skill to be able to have all those things. There was definitely times where putting in the hours, putting in the time. There were long days, but I don't think I was ever at a point where I wasn't optimistic. I was always really excited, getting through the program, smashing out the work, doing role plays, all of those kinds of things. So for me to learn the skills, I was optimistic the whole time. And so it took me about 3 months. It took me about 3 months to get through the core program before I was then role play proficient. So basically the coaches said, Em, we've seen you in role plays, you're doing a great job, you're proficient there. Now you can prepare to get ready for your certification. So when you get certified, that's basically your sign off to say you're trained, you're good to go. We can actually start placing you with businesses. So the great thing about She Sells with Brooke is that you don't just learn the skills, they've got recruitment at the end to help you get into a business. So 3 months in, got to about November. So I'd started August and then it got to November, and that was when I was role play proficient and I started in my first role as a setter. So as a setter, I'm basically on the phones day in, day out, trying to call people who put their details in to potentially get them booked on a call with a closer. And if you've ever been in any kind of sales role or role where you have to dial or make phone calls, when you're on that repetitive cycle of calling, conversations, people hanging up on you, it's a grind. It's definitely hard work. And I think this was part of the next part of the curve. So I'd gone from being super optimistic to coming down into that informed pessimism. I was starting to learn about what it really takes to be in this industry as a setter. And I was training to be a closer. So setting was only going to be short term, and it was definitely a grind, but I learned a lot from it. So that was the start of the down of like, okay, I'm actually realizing what it takes to get into this industry, and it's not as sunshine and rainbows as I thought. Like anything, of course, it's not going to be perfect the whole way through. It's a career change. So I started to have that idea of, okay, I've got the information. I know this is only short term. I will get to a closing role, and once I'm closing, it'll be fine. It'll be just calls. It won't be constantly on the phone, hung up and all those things. It'll be what I envisioned. And then I moved into a closing role, and I started closing in January of 2025. Again, this is where I thought I might have gone back to that kind of optimistic, this is great, but I very much realized that this is where I started to continue down into that informed pessimism, because once you actually start doing the thing, you realize that there are things that are hard because you've never done them before. You're back to the beginning. You're back to the basics. And when you're at the basics and when you're at the beginning, it's really hard, particularly when you're an adult and you've already been doing a career or you've been doing something in one particular way for most of your life. To do something completely different, I think I was a little bit in the mindset of, oh, I'll pick this up. I'm a great communicator. It'll happen really naturally for me. And that's not the case. And I look back now and I think, wow, I thought it was going to be easier than it was. So once I actually got into the closing role and started to get to understand the industry, there are all of the amazing things about it, like I've mentioned. I was choosing my hours. That was the best part. I could pick when I wanted to work, which I'd never done before. So that was a perk. I was on sales calls, so I was doing the thing. I was earning money, and I had the flexibility of working from home. So I had all of those things. But what I started to unpack and be more informed about was the ins and outs of sales. And the ins and outs of sales means that you will have no-shows. You will have people who are booked in your calendar and just won't show up on the call. You'll be sitting there on Zoom and they won't show up. You'll ring them, they'll decline, they just ghost. This is what happens. It's really common. So there's no-shows. People will cancel. You will get on a sales call with someone, you'll get to the end and you will be taking payment and they will ghost you. That was happening to me as well. Or you'll get through a sales call and you'll just forget all of the skills that you have and what you're meant to say and what you're meant to be doing because you're learning, and you'll just completely flop. And you have to go through that scenario. You have to go through those motions to fail forward. And so this is where, for me, I'm starting to go further down into that transition curve. I'm getting further and further and further into the informed pessimism and getting to that crisis of meaning point. Basically where it's like, am I cut out for this? Is this what I want to do? Maybe I could just go back to teaching, because things weren't going exactly how I had planned. I was thinking that I would come into the industry and I'd be straight into a 30% close rate. I'd be making heaps of money and I'd just hit the ground running. And that's not the case. And for some people it is. Some people can come into this industry, they start getting sales calls, they hit the ground running. It's absolutely possible. Brooke, who I learned from, her first month, she earned, I think, $400 when she first started working in sales. Tash, one of our other coaches in the community, had like a 20K month in her first month. So everybody can be different. There's a lot that comes into it. But I think I had gone into this being a little bit cocky that I would hit the ground running. So I started off with about a 17% close rate. 17%. Industry standard is about 30. And sitting at 17, I was like, oh, this actually isn't what I thought it was going to be. And so at that point, I knew that I couldn't just accept that it was 17% and that was it. I don't think I've always been that kind of person that if I start something and I fail straight away that I quit. I think that's something that is a good trait of mine, is that I don't quit easily. So I jumped into more coaching sessions. I had one-on-ones with the sales manager and I started to build up my close rate. My close rate was getting better. Things were getting better. Though on the account that I was working on at the time, I was struggling with the conversations that I was having. And I felt like I wasn't enjoying it. And maybe it was a combination of I wasn't feeling successful because I wasn't closing as many clients, or the offer that I was on I just wasn't really aligned with. There was a lot of things that were going on at the time, but it was a combination of things. And I remember I got to a point where I almost considered taking a job, not in teaching, but someone who I had met. Long story short, I had met at an event. They had an opening at their company. It was a sales role, but it was an in-person sales role. So I'd be working in an office, working for a business, selling their product, but it would be basically like going back to a 9-to-5. And I had seriously considered it. And this was that point of that crisis of meaning, of the turning point of, this is hard, I want to quit, I want to go back to something. And I actually reached out to Brooke. She's been a massive mentor for me throughout this whole thing. And I was explaining what was going on, and I was telling her how I was feeling. I said, I've got all this time on my hands. I am not enjoying the conversations. I was making, mind you, I was making pretty decent money. Even with a 17% close rate, I wasn't making like $200 a month. I was making a decent amount of money, but I wanted to be earning more, and I wanted to be closing more. That was the vision that I built up for myself. And I reached out to her, and she said to me, Em, in a roundabout way, she basically was able to show me that this is the turning point. This is the mirror that is being held up to you. This is the point in which you get to the part of learning something new, a part of a skill set, a part of a career change, where you can either dwell on what is not going well and you can sit in that and go back to doing what you were doing and basically quit, or you can see the situation for what it is and maybe what you need to work on because of it. And so that really shifted my thinking in that, okay, this is the time in my life where I've got all this extra time on my hands because I'm not working as much as I was in teaching. I'm not closing as many sales calls. I'm not enjoying the sales calls that I'm on. Maybe I do need to make a change, but not make a change in that I quit and go back to teaching, but just shift in where I was. So what I decided to do then was continue to build my skill set, but look into other businesses that I could close for. A big thing was that I felt like I wasn't enjoying the conversations. I wasn't having fun. And not that it needed to be fun all the time, but I wasn't really enjoying it. And so instead of quitting and going, you know what, I'm out, like most people do, I went, okay, I need to shift here. So I started looking for another account to work on, something that was a little bit different, something that was a different type of potential client to sell to, and just to see how it would go. I ended up getting on a new account. So this is the second business that I ended up working for. Totally different experience. I felt like I had, again, gone back up the curve to uninformed optimism to informed pessimism and come back down again because what I assumed or what I thought was going to be this experience in selling to this type of client, again, was another hard scenario and something that was really quite a challenge for me. So when you work in sales, you work with all different types of potential clients. You work with people depending on the account. It's going to give you insight into the kind of people you're talking to. So for example, if you are selling on a fitness offer, a weight loss program or offer, typically you're going to be speaking to people who potentially in the past have tried a lot of things and failed, tried a lot of things and failed, tried a lot of things and failed. So when you're speaking to these potential clients, they are not usually in an optimistic mindset. They are not usually coming from a place of courage. They're usually a little bit deflated. They're deflated. They've had issues with their weight, usually most of their life. They feel like nothing's worked. They've been brought up in this toxic weight loss culture. And so you know the type of client that you're talking to is kind of showing up with that energy. Then you might have a business-to-business offer where you're actually speaking to business owners. So you're speaking to business owners who are a totally different potential client than a fitness offer. And the way that you show up on that call, the way you speak to those clients, the way that you invite them into the sales process is completely different. So I had gone from one extreme to the other. I'll put it like that. I've gone from one extreme to the other, thinking that maybe that was the change that I needed to start actually enjoying the calls that I was taking. When I went onto this account, this is where things really changed for me because I had shifted in my perspective of my skill set. I needed to continue working on that. And as time went on, I built my skill set and I really built up my close rate. And I started the momentum and feeling successful in that I was closing a lot of deals, I was making good money, and it was all the things that were happening that I had envisioned on the very beginning when I decided to even do the career change. And what's really interesting is that when I hit my biggest month, and I thought that I would feel this euphoric, I've made it. I thought I would feel this content, but I didn't. I hit my biggest month and I kind of just went, oh, that was a little bit less exciting than I thought it was going to be. So I'd built up this big idea of earning this amount of money was going to equal happiness. Lo and behold, it didn't. So that was another situation. That was another kind of crisis of meaning point for me of, well, I did the thing. I've got the success. I've got the numbers behind me. I've got the skill set. I'm doing really well, but I'm still not feeling fulfilled in this. And so that was actually a really kind of hard conversation I needed to have with myself because this whole time I'm sitting there going, I'm working for a great account. I'm earning really good money. I have everything that we talked about or that I thought was going to be the case when I first started. Why am I still not feeling good? Why am I still not feeling content? Why am I not feeling at peace? Why am I not feeling happy? And so then again, I had to reconsider what I was doing. And I realized that I actually wasn't enjoying these conversations either. So what I have realized, because now I am working on my third account and I can wholeheartedly say that I have found my place in this industry, is that you have to be aligned and congruent with what you're doing. You have to be aligned and congruent with the actions that you're taking in order to grow your business, work on a sales account, learn a new skill, whatever it is, because you can't fake it. You can't fake doing the thing and thinking that you're going to feel a certain way about it. So I kind of have gone up and down the curve a few times. I've gotten to the point, the bottom of the curve, where I've wanted to or considered quitting, doing something different. I don't think I've ever thought I need to go back to teaching or I will go back to teaching. The thought has crossed my mind, not to the point of I'm thinking seriously about this and I'm going to do it. But I have definitely been at a point where I've thought maybe I need to be doing something else. Maybe I need to be in a workplace surrounded by people, because working from home and being by myself and jumping on sales calls, I need that connection in person. And what I've realized, and I'm really grateful for, is that now I have wholeheartedly and can truthfully say that I feel like I have found my home in this space. I'm on an account that I love the conversations that I'm having. I'm excited to get on these calls. I feel energized at the end of them, whereas before I was feeling quite deflated. I wasn't looking forward to them. I was a little bit like, I hope they don't show. Whereas this has been a total 180. And so what I wanted to bring that up for is because you might get to a point where you're at that bottom of the curve and you're in a position where you're considering, do I leave? Do I quit? Do I just go back to what I was doing before? And that's the point where most people will do that. That's where you go further down, you crash and burn. But in that scenario, if you're in that position, you can shift, you can change gears, you can change strategy. You don't have to quit completely. You can just do something different and try it on and see if that helps. Because had I have given up after my first account, I wouldn't have found my second to then learn that what I really needed was my third. And in this industry, we talk about account hopping. Don't be someone who account hops if you're not feeling the success. And it's good to water the grass where you are. Grass isn't always greener. The first account that I had, I didn't experience as much success in terms of my close rate. And so I feel like looking back on that and reflecting on things, I wasn't enjoying the conversations that I was having, but I probably needed to work on my skill set a little bit more. I definitely reflect on that now. My second account, where I was extremely successful, had an amazing close rate, great money, all those things, made me realize that none of that matters if you're not enjoying the conversations that you're having, and that if you don't feel like you're actually genuinely helping people and really aligned with the offer. And if I didn't have either of those experiences, I wouldn't have gotten to where I am now, because I almost quit. I almost quit after that second one. I was genuinely thinking about going and doing something else, not teaching, but I had a few other ideas. So with all of that in mind, once you get to the last part of the curve, which is informed optimism, you've learned what it takes to learn the skills, build the business, grow, whatever that is. And you're now in a position where you have that information and you can be optimistic again. And that's exactly where I am right now, because I have the information. I've gone through the motions of learning the skills, jumping on a couple of accounts, having some really low moments, and pushing through. Because now I'm in this great position where I am on an account that I love. I feel energized about the conversations that I'm having. And it's not to say that it's going to be perfect. It's still going to have the ups and downs of sales. I'm still going to get no-shows. I'm still going to get cancellations. I am still going to get people who will ghost me. I am still going to have scenarios where I plateau in my skill set and I need to continue to build. I'm still going to have all of those things. But the beauty of being at a point of informed optimism is that you've got that knowledge to know that when it gets hard again, that you just need to continue to push and keep going. And so the reason I wanted to create this episode is that this transition curve can apply to any part of someone's journey or life. It doesn't just have to be a career change. And it's really helpful when you know what to expect. Because if you're considering doing something and you know that you're going to go through these phases of the curve, you can prepare for those parts. It doesn't make them any easier, but you're at least prepared and have the knowledge and know that the time will pass and you will continue on. And it's something to consider as well when you think about your own patterns in what you typically do if you are trying something new. And a classic one is that everybody starts these New Year's resolutions. Everybody wants to be better at certain things. Drink less alcohol, spend less money on impulse buys, lose weight, be healthy, do 75 hard. And it's the same transition curve that happens. We start with this excited, optimistic, woohoo, New Year's clicks over and we're like, yes, I'm going to do it. And then a few weeks in, we start to become informed of what it really takes and we go down. And then we go, it's too hard and I'm going to go back to what I was doing before. And that's a cycle that a lot of people do. I've done it before, absolutely. There's been a lot of times where I have probably given up on things. I wouldn't say that I've ever been someone to give up on something that is quite a major change. Little things, yes. But again, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So maybe there's a lesson to learn from that. My biggest takeaway from the transition curve and what I am excited to share about my part in this journey is that you know what's coming. If you know what's coming, you can be prepared for it. And that's exciting. So if you can take anything from what I've said today, it's that change will be hard. Yes, change will be hard. Most people will give up. If you don't want to be a part of the people who give up, then you need to push through when it is a hard part. If you're in the hard part right now, you're in the thick of it, if things feel hard and you want to give up, this is your opportunity to say to yourself that you will continue. You'll push through, you'll keep going. Because what's on the other side, it's great. Catch you on the next one.